Hoggard Jazz. Thanks for taking the time, James. Appreciate it.
Oh, Samo, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
You know, I've played with many guys you play with and did interviews with many guys you play with. So, you know, it's I'm really happy that you took the time. So to ask you about some things, how you do it and how you did it. So appreciate it. But I'll just jump in and I wanted to ask you first about spiritual impressions and you know, I have you on so many records and such a variety of records you have. And then this one came and it was something completely different in a way for me, at least again. And I wanted to ask you, what's the story behind there? And also beautiful.
Well, it's interesting.
So with Harvie also and the rest of the band. And
yeah, well, it's interesting because some of that music came out of a project. I was commissioned to write some arrangements for the Umo Jazz Orchestra with Dean Bowman.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, man.
And so these were actually, I guess why I have so many diverse things, just a little footnote, is that something comes up, I'll just say, well, sure, I'll do it. Maybe I never did it before. I'll just jump in, just try it, just for the hell of it. So I never really wrote for a large jazz orchestra before. And he needed some things, and he wanted to do the spirituals. Now, because of my background hearing this stuff since childhood, I just felt that I should do it since we had a working relationship with small group things over the years. So I wrote a whole bunch of them, and I went over there and conducted it, and we performed them, and it turned out pretty well. You know, it was nice to hear that particular project. So as time went on, I decided to do it in a small group, and I would have Ruth, Naomi, Floyd sing the vocals, an artist whom I produced a number of her albums over the years. And with a core group, the Aphoristic Trio group with Harvie S. and Steve Williams, and that was the group.
yeah.
The saxophone, boy, my mind, who's on saxophone? But anyway. But that was the whole core of the arrangements, basically. I wrote a few extra things. And I thought to myself, just from a philosophical point of view, of the fact that maybe for people who wanted to have a conversation about the meaning of all that music, they can envision, well, where are we today in the state of things?
Yeah, well,
That's just an aside. What is slavery? I mean, it's slavery of the mind. There's people, you know, there's the corporate prison system here and all that kind of stuff. I don't know whether anybody had that conversation really. Maybe they just said, well, these are some spirituals and whatever. But that was kind of my story.
Oh, no, but it's interesting because, you know, it's beautiful to hear, like you mentioned, you know, you grew up with this music, of course, and that you put a stamp also, you being a leader, you know, embracing that part also. Like that's a nice thing I think you did. So after so many records and as a leader and sideman, so you know, it's a beautiful thing.
Oh yeah, no, it was a joy to do, and it was a performing group. We were performing it before I recorded it, so it just made sense just to go in the studio and do it. And before everything changed with this pandemic, you know, we would have a few little things every year in which we would perform that music. So that was a great thing, and it worked well in a lot of different venues. They have the special celebrations in the month, like Juneteenth. I would do it every Juneteenth. I would
Oh, well.
Black History Month. You know, it was like that kind of thing. So it worked out, and I guess from that standpoint, for people who weren't familiar with that music, they could be reintroduced to it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Hmm.
Otherwise, James, I wanted to ask you. You mentioned gospel and
Well, the
but
spirituals, which is different from
spirituals.
gospel.
Yeah. What was like? I don't know. In the beginning, talking about jazz, what was the first jazz? This wow moment that you experienced, I guess, as a teenager that blew your mind, and you decided I want to dig into this world of jazz and improvisation. You remember that?
Yeah. Well, I have to answer that in two prongs. There was somebody, a catalyst that made me want to go into it. Fortunately, because my dad was a saxophonist and he was a band leader, I heard jazz much earlier. I mean, I heard it as a toddler.
Oh, really? Oh, man.
And
Wow.
so there was a sound in my ear that I heard that I guess after that, when I decided to play the music, then I had to reach toward that sound, whatever that was. I didn't know how to do it specifically, but how can I get that sound that I heard that struck me even as a toddler? Because there's some things that really got me. We can talk about that. But to answer your question, and this is how it went about. This is kind of a funny story. There was a band. We were freshmen in high school. We had a band. I think we called, well, whatever we called ourselves. It was named after some sort of whiskey. Okay. And we played all these tunes. We played stuff like Joe Zawinul's Mercy, 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 Grazing in the Grass. And we did some pop tunes, some covers. James Brown, that kind of stuff. So we're rehearsing, and this one of my friends, Michael McClendon, whose father was also a saxophonist, Jimmy. He said, my father said that Charlie Parker was the greatest saxophonist that ever lived. And I'm like, who's Charlie Parker? I had heard him actually, but I didn't, I heard him as a toddler and didn't really investigate it. So I'm going through records at home till I find Charlie Parker. And I find the Savoy album that has Charlie Parker and alternate takes and that type of stuff. And I played it for about 15 minutes. I put it away because it kind of blew my mind. It was too much for me. I knew it was great. I knew it was genius. I said, wait a minute, this is too much. It was mind blowing. Then I came back to it a couple weeks later and I said, wow, I didn't know whether I was going to actually follow in that path, but I do know for sure that was great music. And I became a listener first. I was still playing like covers and other things that you played that you could work at where people would hire you to do as a teenager playing organ. But I was listening to Charlie Parker, Bud Powell, Thelonious Monk, and that just opened my world. I knew that immediately that music was genius. And I appreciated it first just as a listener, really. Not even trying. Well, there was nobody to play that music with. So, I'm just listening to it, basically. I mean, every now and then my father would have a gig and we played like Perdido or we played some, but I had an idea when we played Girl from Ipanema or Satin Doll, those things, I could sort of, try whatever I tried with my limited knowledge, being informed by these great masters, where I should at least try to go if I was playing such a thing. And then my father was great help with certain things too, because while he wasn't the study musician in the sense that he had time to practice, he knew the road that you had to travel in order to get there. And he had excellent taste. So he could tell you, that's not it, or this is what you should listen to. This is the way the music's supposed to go. He was very knowledgeable in those terms.
Yeah. And when was then did you start then transcribing? Like, how did you learn the jazz vocabulary? Actually, I mean, like on piano.
Well, yeah, you transcribe okay, I'm playing organ. So here's another story. I'm playing organ. I'm not really, I'm playing piano, church, gospel. I took piano lessons since the second grade, so I'm playing, some Beethoven, Chopin, you know, no jazz. All right. So I'm listening to the organ players. I had a friend, he said, oh man, I have this album. It's Lou Donaldson, Alligator Boogaloo. And Lonnie Smith, Dr. Lonnie Smith, who recently passed, was on that. So I'm listening to those solos. I said, oh man, well, I like to play like that. So I would transcribe his solos.
Oh, really? Oh, man.
Transcribe some of Jack McDuff's. But, by ear, I didn't write anything down. I would just learn them.
Yeah, phrases.
Because I didn't know what notes to play. So I said, well, if I could play these notes, and then maybe I can mix them up and find my own notes in another sequence to play after I learned how to play these solos. And so that's kind of how I started off playing the organ.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. By the time I started playing more keyboards, like, well, in Youngstown, Ohio, where I'm from, you need an electric keyboard. I would copy little licks and things like that. I don't know. I didn't do a whole lot of transcribing because I guess I had listened so much. I just started trying to find my way, even though it was kind of sad. But I would try to say, okay, well, this is Bud Powell like, this is something sort of what McCoy would do. And then if I didn't know what it was, I would transcribe a couple courses of Harvie or McCoy to something I could figure out. I said, man, this is crazy. I mean, what are they doing? So, I would do things like that.
Oh, yeah. That's so important to listen.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like, by listening, you get to, I tell this to my students, just listen. And to a record or an artist for 2 weeks, and you'll get the language just by listening. That's
hey, and the more you listen, the more you can hear. That's the whole thing. And it's sort of ironic because the students today have so much more access with the internet. Yeah. And you ask them, well, did you hear Charlie Parker play something, Joe Lovano, or Ornette Coleman, whoever? I'll say, yeah, I heard it once.
Exactly.
Yeah, but through no fault of their own. I mean, we live in such a short-term memory type of culture. Everything when you think about social media, when you think about the Instagram and all these different things, it's just, or Twitter, it's just like you only have a certain amount of time or space to say anything. It has to be short, it has to be brief. So they don't get the idea. I wonder what students that I would have that would sit down and listen to Om, side one and side two, and then over and over again.
Exactly.
By John Coltrane, for people who don't know what that is, which is challenging to listen to in the first place for most people.
Sure. No, but I agree. It's like, I speak to my students, talking about buying CDs or vinyl, like it was a whole, still is actually a whole romantic experience for me, taking the booklet out, putting the album on, listening to the whole album once first, and then 76 times until it's the CD or whatever starts, I mean,
we sound like old fogies, man.
No, there is something romantic about it, right? I mean,
yeah, right.
I don't know. I mean,
oh man, I mean, it was really incredible to be able to do that, and I learned so much. And not only that, there's that extra step if you like. And when I was still a listener, a teen, so I'm listening to Charlie Parker. I go to the library. I find some information on him. There was this book. The best book that Ross Russell wrote was the book where the musicians were talking about Charlie Parker. So that gave you a lot of insight. What Walter Bishop had to say, what Max had to say, Jay McShann. Those type of things. I mean, that was very educational. And then when you come to New York years later and you meet these people or play with them,
Exactly, yeah.
But just really getting deep into the music and understanding what it was all about. And, one of the things that I learned too, quite early, that it was very difficult not only to learn the music, but just to be the music.
Hmm.
So you had to be brave, you had to be resolute and say, well, I'm going to do this no matter what the cost.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is also what I wanted to ask you. Like, no matter what the cost, like your decision to move to New York was in this regard, I guess, completely natural. But how did how did that move happen, and how did you gather up the courage to do it actually? And how was the first moment when you came there? You remember that?
Yeah, I knew that there's a lot of things I did not want to do once I made the decision that I was going to do that. And actually, after high school, I wasn't too sure whether I wanted to really play music at all
Mm.
because I had to really think about it because I knew it was hard for all the reasons that we talked about.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with me not loving the music or loving to play because basically from age 12, I played some sort of music and made money doing it. Then I went to school, I studied music, and there was jazz elective that I took the last couple of years that had a lot of musicians who you may know in the band, like Ralph LaLama
Sure.
was
Yeah.
in the band. Harold Denko was one of the original
Oh man, I
people in the
love
band.
Harold.
Yes.
Such a player.
And
Yeah.
he would come to the university and, give me a few pointers and things while I was a college student. But I think at that point, when our band, Youngstown State University band under the aegis of Tony Leonardi, won this college jazz competition, I'm sorry. And we got these scholarships to the Jamie Ebersol Clinic. And I met Rufus Reed, Joe Henderson, Dave Baker, James Williams. I said, oh, okay. They were so encouraging. I think that's the thing. I said, okay, I can do this. If they say I can do this, I'll just practice it and try to do it. And I figured if I get to New York, if I sucked so bad I could drive a cab, I could get certified as substitute teaching school. I figured, but
Sure.
I could stay in Ohio. I could stay in Youngstown, Ohio. I just had to leave. At least the music's there. I could enjoy the music or whatever. So that was kind of my mindset. I was just going to go there, but it was terrifying because you had so many seasoned musicians, and I wasn't seasoned. I had to really learn, in terms of the language, the vocabulary. I knew I was musical.
Yeah.
But that's just like I said, well, he's talented, but you have to work in order to get to, a level.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. I
And
just worked and worked, and I wasn't trying to be whatever a jazz star would be and that kind of stuff, but just working great situations that were fun and just great for me and kind of like music giving, life giving.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But what year did you move exactly to New York?
It was 1978.
78 already. Oh man, wow, that's incredible. But who were the first connections when you came there? Did you already know some people when you arrived, or
Well,
like
some people from
making
the
these
college,
connections? Okay.
because Ralph was already there.
Wow.
There was
Okay.
another guy named Ben Wilson, Bill Kirshner. He was from Youngstown. I knew him with Harold Danko. I used to bug him. He had a restaurant gig. I used to come and sit in. So I would just go to jam sessions. And that's how I started meeting people. They would hear me play. We would exchange numbers. And you would end up getting a gig.
Yeah.
And Dave LaLama, Ralph's brother, actually turned me on to my first gig. It was a restaurant gig playing solo piano.
Oh man. Wow.
And I remember the place was called Un Deux Trois. And I played there midtown for a couple weeks. 3 weeks, maybe 4. And then there was no gigs. And then another gig came up from a drummer I met by the name of Al Dreers, who might be for some people some of the unknowable musicians, but he recorded with a lot of different musicians. If you do a lot of research, you can find his name as a drummer on a lot of recordings from the 50s, and he worked with a lot of different people, including Dizzy Gillespie.
Uh-huh.
But in fact, he was a good mentor of mine because he explained the things that were mysteries to me in terms of how the music should go, in terms of the so-called bebop language and all that. You know, it was very helpful to me to regard. The first gig I had, here's a funny gig. This is something I could never tell my parents that I had this gig. So there was this gig in Midtown where we would play. There was no bass player. It was just bass, drums, and trumpet for a while. Dizzy Reese did it. Jack Walrath did it.
Oh.
Okay, and it was in a strip club. So we played for an hour, and the girls would go out and strip for an hour. And I remember the song, "Get Down Boogie Oogie Oogie." That was one of the things that you would strip to.
Oh, shit.
So we did that gig for a while. And it went for a long time. It didn't really pay that much money. But, you know, it was like an opportunity to play with Dizzy Reese and Jack Walrath for a time and play with Al. And, you know, it was the beginning of something. You know, so like my first two gigs in New York City.
That's bizarre. That's quite cool. But quite fast, I don't know if it was fast, but, you know, when I checked the records I have, you know, one of the very early ones was Talking to the Sun, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's early on. And that one, aside from some minor things I did before, was probably one that was where most people would have, you know, seen my name. Which album that I still really enjoy listening
Man,
to.
it's a...
The great Abbey Lincoln.
Yeah. How did that story with Abbey happen? How did the connection with Abbey begin? I mean, can you share that, please?
Okay, yes. Well, what happened was I was doing a jam session every Monday at a place called Pumpkins in Brooklyn. And people would come from Manhattan. I mean, people like Bobby Watson, Steve Coleman, Mark Johnson. And so they knew of my playing from this jam session. I would play behind everybody. That's the way I sort of were able to beat those guys. I mean, I worked with Bobby for about a year around the New York area and up and down the, you know, Eastern Seaboard. You know, we would do a few things. Then the other part of it was I saw Abbey when she first came back to New York months, and I heard her with a band. And I said, I would really like to work with that person. You know, they were just my mind. But it's funny, like I'm not one of these people who really do this ordinarily. But I told a friend of mine, I said, you know what, I'm gonna go get a passport. And he said, why? Where are you going? I said, I don't know. I'm just gonna get a passport. So, and she called me in the next couple of months due to Steve Coleman, Mark Johnson, who had heard me. And the first gig that I was supposed to do with her, I could not do because I did have, I was upstate. I had some gigs upstate, and those days you had an answering machine and you didn't have a cell phone. So I missed the call. So Mel Waldron did those.
Oh,
and then
wow,
she said,
man.
well, I have something else. And it was in 2 months. And then we went to Europe. You know, and that's how I began. And then that ended up being something that I did. I was in her band for 9 years.
Wow. Man. How's that experience like? I mean, you know, I've talked to people who played in, let's say, Betty Carter's band, you know, and how was she like as a band leader? And what did you learn, like, that you kind of transferred then later, I guess, to your own bands? Or like, what was your experience with her and playing in Europe also and all this?
Oh, it was really remarkable because she really wanted the music to mean something, for one thing. And she wanted everybody to be free because she would sing, she might not sing one of her songs the same way the next night.
Mm.
She said she didn't want anything patched, she didn't want an arrangement. So you really had to listen. So let's say if we were doing, let's talk about a song that a lot of people sing these days from her songbook, Throw It Away. Maybe one day she would do it one tempo, she'll do it another tempo the next day. Maybe she would do it like a lot of ad lib with the song at another time. So you shouldn't. If you play something that you played last night, you say you played that last night. She'll tell. She remembers too. You had to have your ears open. You had to listen. You know,
Yeah.
I really learned how to listen and how not to just say, okay, I have something worked out. I'm going to play this, and this is the thing we're going to play night after night. And then just merging melody and lyrics together. She had this
Yeah.
approach where she would tell the band, I want you to explore the song with me. Now, all that I said before still ties into that. So you had to listen to the way that she said the words. Okay, so if she said words, if I'm playing a fill, how can I make my fill stack up to what she just did with her voice? You know,
Yeah.
not to complement it. So that was really major. And I think those were the golden things that I learned from her that I have carried throughout my music. It was just things that I may have thought about to a certain extent before I joined her, but I mean, it was really seared into the front of my brain moving forward
Yeah.
after that.
Yeah. I can believe that. Yeah. I mean, she was such an interpret of lyrics.
Right.
It's yeah, incredible. I wanted to ask you, James, like you mentioned, you went to Europe with her. Was that your first time in Europe then with
Now,
Abbey,
that was my
actually?
first time in Europe, yes.
How was that like for you, that
Oh,
experience? We're talking still, I guess, about early
oh
80s,
yeah,
which
you know, I
was,
still think about some of the experiences, some that we won't talk about, just just things behind the scenes, kind of funny, comical things. But the music, oh man, I mean, it was a great experience. I think the first place we played was in Austria.
really? Oh,
Um,
man. Wow.
what was the name of that? Which Austrian place that was?
Maybe Vienna, in Wien or something.
Hmm?
In Wien? Vienna?
No, no, it wasn't that one.
Oh,
It was
okay.
the one. It was outdoors,
Oh,
and
wow.
it's
Okay.
usually around in September, October.
Oh, like Saalfelden
Could have been that
Festival.
one,
Yeah,
or
the
it could have
festival.
been Vienna. Is it? No, it wasn't that. Anyway,
Yeah.
we played this festival, and it was really great. Originally, the only part that I was a little saddened about was Joe Henderson was supposed to play with us, but he never made it.
Oh, man.
But so we did trio, and it was a great feeling, just to do that. It's something that I had never done before. We were there for about a couple weeks, and it was very delightful. We played in Italy, we played in Sicily,
Oh, wow.
and we played a little bit of Germany. I remember that too. I remember some of the places we played. I also remembered um, that I had a non-smoking seat. The only problem was the seat right ahead of me was smoking. And these were some incredible chain smokers throughout that whole flight. I couldn't breathe throughout the whole tour
Oh,
because my
shit.
nose had gotten clogged up and everything. I remember that too.
Oh, man. Yeah. And it's also like, back there, it was like every state had a different currency and there was borders everywhere. And that
Oh
experience
yeah,
must have been
I still
also,
have some lira, a
oh,
little bit,
really? Oh, man.
and some of that old money.
Bizarre. Yeah.
Yeah, right. You had to change up. Oh. But yeah, that was part of the whole scene.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, I remember because, when I started touring, of course, there was Euros everywhere and the borders were open. So when I hear stories of you guys who already, or like even older generation, like early 70s, being in Europe and, East Germany and Czechoslovakia and Hungary and Yugoslavia, it's
Oh,
such an
yeah. I remember the
interesting
first
notion of
time
this.
I went to Bratislava.
Oh, really?
And that,
Slovakia.
that was, that was before everything, the whole Soviet
Yeah.
regime ended. And that was a surreal thing to go through the checkpoint with the flashing, I mean, not the flashing light, but the beaming light and everything. It just felt like something out of a movie.
Exactly, man. Yeah. Yeah, bizarre. I mean, yeah, I can imagine. I can just imagine. That's just like when I hear these stories and they make incredible.
Yeah.
But I want you mentioned Steve, the through Steve you got the connection to Abbey, right? Uh,
Yes.
I wanted to ask you about your connection with Steve and how you guys started exploring this concept that Steve introduced, with the 5 elements and the whole M bass, which the first time I heard it, I don't know which record was, probably Rhythm People or Dropkick or something like that with Marvin on drums, and I was just like, what's happening? And I tried transcribing it, and I didn't know back then. I was like a teenager still, and it was beyond anything. I still probably have a transcription or lead sheet of that, probably all wrong. But how was your introduction to that, and how did you guys actually start doing that? I mean, if you can
Well, let's talk
describe
about
that.
Steve first. Now, Steve and I came to New York the same year.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And the first time I heard him was, and I didn't speak with him. I used to go to these Paul Jeffries big band rehearsals. So I heard him play. I said, well, that's different, but it's nice, Yeah, so Steve had a different mindset. And of course, we worked together. Whenever she needed a horn player, well, it was Steve Coleman. So we played a lot with together. Graham Haynes and Steve once at the Vanguard for a whole week.
Oh man!
Which yeah,
Wow,
we were doing
beautiful.
some original music that wasn't quite like the M bass stuff, but it drove some of the older musicians crazy because it was a little different.
Yeah.
But Abby just loved Steve. She wanted us to explore that way too, to do something that came out of what we thought about. So Steve, I always considered always a thinker, and I remember writing some music that I thought was. I said, well, only Steve could play this, and I want to hear his sound. And this was around the time he was starting the whole 5 elements thing, in which Jerry Allen was the
Yeah.
first keyboardist. So when he asked me to do it, I was more than happy to do it. It was at that point, I had did a lot of straight ahead things, and I was going thinking about going through the normal channels and doing gigs. But I said, well, but this is different. I said, I'm willing to just do this. But the one thing that would help us, at least help me learn the music, um, I remember that one of the record dates he had, the music was so different from, let's say, rhythm people and all that. I said, look, will you give me your MIDI file of this? Because to me, to play the music, it was listening to all the parts.
Yep.
What Whatever part Marvin had, Dave Gilmore, what he played, the bass part. As long as I had an idea what everybody was playing, I was good. I could, because he usually let me be a free agent. He would have those parts. Sometimes I would have a part, but just like as a keyboard player, you just listen and you just play and find your place within that. So regardless of the mixed beater type of situation or how things were happening, once you get an idea of what it sounded like, then you played off that sound.
Yeah.
But that was my approach to it. but I needed to. That was the type of music where somebody give you like a lead sheet, and you're just playing. That didn't even make sense to me. I just
Exactly.
needed to hear everybody's part in order to play it, which is kind of like if you think about traditional West African music. No matter what it is,
Yeah.
it's everything's interconnected.
Yeah. But you mentioned like the changing meters, and Steve played that with Dave Holland also, and I mean with Doc Hammond. I love the trio with Doc Hammond, like Spaces. That one, like 82. I
Yeah.
think it was. That's
Well, he got a
incredible.
lot of things from Doug,
Yeah. Yeah.
particularly the way that you create a drum part.
Yeah. But how did you cope with those odd meters to make it natural for you? What was your learning curve there? I mean, like how to get natural playing those?
Well, I was thinking about a little bit of it, things along those lines anyway, but it was really just
Listening.
and rehearsing and trying to find your part that way. Everything that I said, because you hear seven, you don't. It wasn't good. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2. That wasn't going to work. But you just had to feel the way it is, like a clave or something like that. So like he had one thing. It was like one of my favorites was this thing where do 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 do. So do 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 do. Yeah, so you had to feel that in order to play it.
Yeah, man, wow. But now it makes sense because, like, now we're exposed to all this music that's been created afterwards. But what you guys did in the mid '80s or late '80s, that was, really fresh ground. So that's why I'm asking this. Nowadays, like everyone is exploring odd meters for the last 20 years or like.
Yeah, like we thought.
Yeah.
Because, you realize that nobody was really, you had people playing in 7. I mean,
Yeah, sure.
and the different meters beforehand, but not quite with that type of groove. Using maybe even contemporary type funk grooves or doing, taking things from, other cultures too, because he had this one thing that he still does today. I could never play that tune. I can't remember the name of it, but I know it started with Terry, that one. That tune that's one tune I didn't know what the heck was happening with that tune. In fact, I still have it, and one day I'm going to go to it and figure it out. I mean, where it's comfortable for me to play. Probably now I can. But that tune knocked me for a loop. It was just a mystery to me, even though I liked it, but I couldn't play it.
Incredible. Man, yeah. Well, it's beautiful. No, still, if you listen to those compositions, man, it's beautiful. And what you guys play. And, also the Dave, I talked with Dave Gilmer, and he also, like, how to approach guitar playing on those compositions was so fun to hear also his side, how to find the space. And, yeah, I mean, incredible. But
it's great. Those were some great tours too, and a great musical environment to be in.
yeah.
And I think that moving forward with that, we first talked about Abbey Lincoln, but one thing, because Steve, he was such a student of music and sound and creating new different sounds, and it really influenced me just in terms of thinking about music in another way, because it's not like I was trying to write music like Steve, because M-bass, actually, the whole idea of back row bass, array of extemporaneous improvisation or whatever the hell that was. It's a way of thinking, thinking about music differently.
Yeah, so important. Yeah. But speaking of thinking about music differently, I also wanted to ask you about your other experience with, a vocalist like Cassandra Wilson, who was, again, closely connected also to Steve. And how was your experience with Cassandra compared, let's say, to Abbey? And like, in a way, they go hand in hand almost, but like, still, how do you see that?
Well, I played with Cassandra, a little over 2 years. But it was great. But there was a lot of, she sort of moved away from some of the things. At that point, she was starting to move away from some of the things that she did from the albums that were produced by Steve.
Yeah.
That sort of had that influence in it. But there was a lot of that going on. So that was a kind of a logical step, particularly moving from Steve. I would still play with Steve and play with Cassandra for that period of time. And Cassandra was, as always, it still is, a unique stylist. She has a way, accessibility of rendering a tune, with her voice and the way that she does it. And it was that was a great experience too, the tours that we had. And I particularly like the live album that we did.
Yeah, that's a beautiful one. Yeah, that's a beautiful record. Yeah. But otherwise, through all these experience playing with Abbey and Steve and Cassandra, I wanted to ask you, when was the moment then you decided that you want to become a band leader, and what was that moment based on? I mean, I know you did people music. I guess it was the first one, right?
Yeah, and then before that, there was a joint venture by Tali Kibwe, known as TK Blue now.
Yeah.
Called Live at Birdland.
Birdland, yeah.
So it was around that time that 1992, 93, even though I had done some concerts and things like that, but it was a good time to try to record. Either the difficulty, of course, of recording, you have the marketplace. If you're going to record independently, or if you're going to try to deal with a label.
Yeah.
And which was kind of weird because I would go to one particular label the person will remain nameless. Me being sort of naive, I figured they knew that, I could play whatever you wanted me to do. If you want me to play standards, I'd do that. But I did my original music, and he complains, and why did he send me that music? And this guy, so that's a whole marketplace thing. I'm saying that to say that many of the things that I did, everything I've done has been self-produced. And the Spiritual Impressions in my last few albums were released on Inner Circle Music, which Greg Osby created for us to have like a cooperative label. So what took me so long is probably part of the other side of the situation, to record or to do leader stuff, because I guess I kind of hem and haw over the difficulty of just being able to put something out.
But are you like comfortable when you look at yourself, like mid-90s, and now your development as a band leader? How do you see your growth here?
Oh, well, you never stop growing. And during the pandemic, when everything shut down, actually I was supposed to go in the studio 2020. But everything's sort of been on hold, and I think it won't be until the spring, summer, and maybe I will have 2 projects by then to
Wow.
do because I had written for one project. And the reason of that delay is that, well, I'm in this studio here. I'm teaching at the University of Georgia. And so I'm dividing my time between New York and
Mm.
here. And so I'm getting acclimated to this new position. So that kind of slowed that element down. But growth, you know, I feel it in my writing especially, and some of it I'm kind of wrestling with and trying to think about, okay, well, what direction would I like to go? And I think the reason that I want to do two albums, one will be a little more in a traditional vein, and then another one might be a little more experimental.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Because I need to, well, I need to satisfy my multiple personalities.
Exactly. Yeah. But who are they with? Do you have already like a personnel? I mean, like who are you gonna do it with?
Well,
Your mind?
I had been rehearsing. The other one may be a trio, the more traditional thing. I mean, that's a little more set. Harvie S, who's been on
Mhm.
my last couple albums, we had been working on something along with Elvester Garnett.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah,
Oh, man,
and
beautiful.
that will probably be the trio album. And we had already and we actually laid some tracks down in my apartment at the in New York City. So I already have some tracks that I probably could use.
Oh, super.
Truth be told, I'll just have to finish it up. And maybe, I mean, in this day, maybe the rest of the stuff will be in the studio. I just have to decide. I hadn't really thought too deeply, or I hadn't thought that through yet.
Yeah.
But that's where that is. Now, the other stuff, some of the music has yet to be written. It's just starting to be formulated in my brain, and I have this idea of a vague idea of some of the things that I might be able to do. But I would just like to just sit down and see where the music would go. Just start writing and see what I come up with. That's kind of what I do anyway. I just say, well, okay, let me just write something. I don't know what it's going to sound like or anything, because you write one measure and then you write the next measure and then you have something.
Yeah. How do you work there? Yeah, with writing. I mean, like you written like the Raw Deal and like all the songs on the first record. There's some really strong writing there, and throughout your career. But you said like you go from one beat from one bar to one bar. Like, how is your brain working when it comes to composing? Do you like write down things on a daily basis, or you just sit down and write it?
Yeah, I'm not one of these people to write on a daily basis. I wish I had the time to do that. When I know I have to write, I sort of write. I'm kind of like that now. When I did the Aperturistic Trio album, the gas is coming out of this swivel chair. Sorry about this. I actually challenged myself. It became a game. Like Harvie would come over to the house, and the night before I would just write something.
Yeah.
Some of the music came out like that. And then I remember I was going to the health food store one day and I heard like this melody. It was like da 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 ba ba boo dee doo doo dee. That was time to make a move. And so I had my phone, I sang it into the phone because I remember Hard Silvers said, or Dizzy Gillespie, those guys said, oh, I have a tape recorder, so you can record your ideas. I said, I lose a lot of ideas over the years because I don't bother to document it. I said, okay, well, that's nice. That's improvisation. Whatever. I'll think of something else. But that one, I said, you know what? I like what I just heard in my head. So I did that, and that turned into a tune. So there's a lot of different combinations. Sometimes, I might challenge myself. Like you were talking about spiritual impressions. I wrote an instrumental called African Spirals.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of came out of a whole thing. I had this book that had these dimensions of the pyramids. And so I used the dimensions that were supposed to be golden mean and all that kind of stuff to approximate the artwork that I saw.
Okay.
Or the dimensions or the description, these geometric dimensions. So sometimes I do stuff like that just for fun, to see if I would come up with something different or something like that. So there's all kinds of ways to write, and who knows? I don't know. That's why I come in just empty. I don't really. Sometimes I don't even have any ideas. I just start with something and see where it goes.
Yeah. I mean, that's the best. But yeah, you get stuck many times. Sometimes I tried a good exercise like in COVID, this period, just trying to write a tune a day, whatever comes up. Just if it's 7 bars, if it's 1 bar, if it's just 1 line, and then, just to keep the head going. And I thought that was quite liberating and quite.
Oh, yeah, it's great. And actually, I'm thinking about like school's about out, and I'm going back to New York. Part of my plans really is just to do writing. So I'll just have that space there in my brain and in terms of time, because nothing's really going on, except for I'm doing a record date with Jay Hoggard.
Oh, wow. Beautiful.
Yeah, at the old Rudy Van Gelder studio.
Oh, man. Okay.
Yeah, but other than that, I'll probably just sit home and just do exactly what you're doing. So if I have that space, I'll do that. Plus, whatever I want to do just in terms of practicing, try to not forget things that I already know, or try to remember things that I forgot. And it's interesting, too. I have a few at the school, a couple prep students who are actually want to be like performance majors. So, I try to keep that thing going too. In terms of but I haven't looked at this repertoire or that kind of stuff.
That's good, yeah.
Yeah, so you just keep everything going. The whole, just music, and without naming what it is, or listening. There's a lot of music that I had listened to that might not be the music that we play. Maybe it's some music from some other lands or something. Maybe I want to listen to some Chinese music or something, folk music, or some African music I hadn't heard, or that type of thing.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah, and those things all feed you.
Yeah.
And it also keeps you rooted if you hear that, because my basic philosophy is simple about music. Music is universal in the sense that it comes from humans. So I look for the humanity in the music.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. True. That's a nice one. Yeah, James, just one last question, not to take too much of your time. You've been so present also on the records with Joe Lovano. And how did this story, like quite a long story now already, with Joe begin actually? When did you guys meet and play the first gig?
Oh, well, we had known each other for years, and when I came to New York, Harold Denkel was actually in the loft with Joe. And Joe was then, as he always has been. I come up to the loft. Joe has a horn in his mouth, or he's playing drums, and they're having a jam session. Anytime I went to that loft when Joe was in town. But we would talk. I remember I was with Kevin Mahogany, another great singer. I miss him. And we were in Poland, and I'm sitting with Joe. I said, yeah, we should do something together. I said, yeah. But what really started it off was Abbey Lincoln. We were at Lincoln Center. We were she did a whole week there, but the same night, we were on the same bill. And so that started it off. And so he said, yes, I have to call you. He called me, and then I started splitting duties with John Hicks with the non-net, and then doing quartet things, and that actually pivot into the Us Five eventually.
Yeah.
You know, one funny thing about it, I had worked with Kevin for many years, and after that, I did a lot of singers gigs. If it wasn't my gig, or I was working with TK Blue on some things, I was doing singer gigs. So I started having all this space to play. I said, oh, wow, after 2 courses, I was finished when I first started playing. You know, it'd been so long since I had stretched out initially, you know. But it was great because Joe is so free. I mean, one thing we shared, the whole regard for the tradition.
Yeah.
But then also we could go out on the edge and play a little bit and then come back and do something traditional. And, you know, that's kind of where I live, and just having a wide open attitude about what music is, and then be as authentic as possible when you're doing that exact thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Cool. Great, James. That, I will not take more of your time. Thanks for sharing some of these thoughts. Beautiful to hear you.
Oh, it was a ball, and thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, and it was a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it too, and hope to see you, man, one day in Europe soon. So I'll
Untitled Chapter.